commonly used number lines before to place numbers in order, going from 0 to 1 or 10 to 20 or 100 to 150. You can place any numbers on there. Fractions are no different. Fractions are just parts of a whole. And in this case, we're going to be really talking about it as the idea of partitioning and dividing into parts. And again, fractions are equal parts of that whole. Thus far, we've gone through and if we've looked over here at 1/4, we can take this shape and we can divide it like this. We have a vertical line and a horizontal line. And in each of these, we know is going to be 1/4, another 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. That's really helpful if we're dividing up some food to somebody or if we're dividing up space. We can physically see the amount of space that's there. In this case, we want to start looking at it as a number line. And I've got 4 number lines on the right-hand side. The first thing that we need to do is start by putting in 0 and 1. Uh, what's really, really important when we're looking at number lines, in particular with all these, is that notice that the area where I'm putting in 0 and 1 is going to be in the same space. This is going to help us as we move on into comparing fractions, finding those that are equal, greater, or less than. You can't compare fractions when you're not comparing the same size fraction. So in this case, we want to make sure that our 0 and our 1 creates the same amount of space for all 4 of these number lines. Again, here I'm going to write 1, 1, 1, and 1. This same 1/4 that we had from before can be placed over on the side, on this in here. When we look at 1/4, we're really looking at this line being divided into 4 equal parts. So here I'll start in the middle because it's easy for these even numbers, particularly 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All of those, when we have those even denominators, can be started by when you divide your whole in half. Then you can divide out from there into smaller pieces. Here I can then divide each of these halves. And here I know now that these all look about the same. I'm going to mark this as 1/4. As I keep going, I move on one more time. I now have 2/4. You might call it 1/2. We'll get into that idea a little bit later, this idea called equivalence. But for now, we're going to call it 2/4. Here, we're going to call this 3/4. And this 4 would be 4/4. 4 out of 4. Because we have 4 1/4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can do this for any fraction. Here, if I want to divide these into thirds, I could come here and decide that I'm going to divide it into 3 equal parts, roughly about here, and again, right about here. So they roughly are about the same. Notice my third is a little bit larger than my quarter. My 2/3 is a little larger than 2/4, and a little less than 3/4. And I can mark these underneath here. And again, I can do this for any fraction. I'm going to divide it into equal parts and then label underneath so that I can see them. Again, when I'm for work a little bit later, you're going to want to make sure that when you make your number lines or whatever it is that you're using to compare, that you're comparing the same size. And I would place them vertically because then here I can compare 1/3 to 1/4 and I can see just how large this 1/3 piece is compared to this 1/4 piece. And I'm not left to guess. Give it a shot on your own, placing some fractions on a number line. Try that here for doing eighths and also for sixths. Give that a shot.